Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to talk about the mirrorless system from Canon, so the R series. Just a little preface to this video. I'm not going to talk about every single model of the R series. I'm going to talk about some of the models that people look into when they want to start into sports photography. I'm going to start with the least expensive and I'm going to work my way up to the most expensive ones. During this video you might see me looking sideways, so I'm just glancing over my notebook to look at the specs of the camera I'm talking about because I can't possibly remember everything. One final call out is the price for each model. So the price I'm going to be talking about is from Canon Ireland as of right now, right? So that doesn't mean that you can't get these cameras for a cheaper price. Obviously you can. There's always promotions at authorized retailers and whatnot, but just for comparison's sake, I went ahead and went to the Canon Ireland website, got the prices for all of these models, and I'm going to be showing you so that you can see the gradual increase, I suppose, in price from one model to the next. The first camera is the Canon R50. It costs €900. It's a crop sensor camera. It does not have weather sealing, and one thing that it also doesn't have is a mechanical shutter. Now for sports photography that's very important because otherwise you get what is known as rolling shutter. If you have seen some of my previous videos, you know what that means. If you haven't, check it out. I'm gonna link one here so you understand what rolling shutter means. But if you're just starting out, if you want to have a camera just, you know, to take a few photos of the family, of little sports events, nothing too serious, this is an okay camera to get because the focusing system is quite good. And trust me, like the cameras that we used to use many years ago did not have the capabilities that this camera has. So the quality is there, and if you're starting out with this one, you'll be okay. So again, no mechanical shutter. With the electronic shutter, it takes 15 frames per second. Crop sensor camera, like I said, 24.2 megapixels. The battery that it uses is the LPE17, so it's a very tiny camera. So if you're thinking about shooting a full game, it's possible that it won't last the whole game, or if it does, you won't have much battery left. So maybe buy two cameras if you're thinking of two batteries if you're thinking about buying this camera. This camera does not allow for a battery grip, so battery grips have multiple purposes. Obviously, one being that you have dual batteries, so it lasts longer. You can take pictures in portrait mode without having to do weird positions, so you'll have the same buttons when you flip the camera. And just the ergonomics, the balance with the lenses is better. So to me at least, it's a very important accessory. If you can get it, for this camera you cannot. Then for cards, this camera only allows for one SD card, and that's not necessarily bad if you're not taking this seriously. But if you're looking into doing sports photography at a professional level, having the ability to have two cards in your camera is very important. In case something goes wrong with one, you always have a backup. So again, entry line, €900. If you're just starting out, you're not going to take this too seriously, this would be an okay camera to get. After the R50 comes the R10, and the differences are not that many, so I'm going to highlight the main differences between the two, starting with the price. So the R10 comes in at €1,170. It also does not have dual SD slots, so only one, just like the R50. Does not have a grip either. The battery is the same sensor as well, so crop sensor, 24.2 megapixel. Now comes the big difference between the two, is that with the electronic shutter, which I don't care too much to be honest, the R50 has 15 frames per second, the R10 has 23. Now the biggest difference is that the R10 does have a mechanical shutter and it takes 15 frames per second. For sports photography, I would recommend at least 10, so 15 is more than sufficient. So you can see where the price difference is between the two. It also does not have weather sealing. So if you look at all the differences between the two, and there's more, obviously you can compare and look into blogs and sites and reviews and whatnot that compare the two in a lot of detail. The biggest one, in my opinion, between these two is the mechanical shutter, right? One not having it, the R50, and the other one having one with 15 frames per second justifies the price difference, in my opinion. The model that comes after, and in my opinion is the best value for your money without a doubt in all of the cameras that I'm going to be talking about today, this one, the R7, is the best that you can get for the money that you spend. So the quality, the features, everything that you get for what you pay, I think the R7 is the best one in the whole lineup. Talking about specs, the R7 does have weather sealing. The mechanical shutter is also 15 frames per second, just like the R10. When you're talking about the electronic shutter, it goes up to 30 frames per second. The sensor though is much better. It is a 32.2 megapixel sensor. The battery is also better, so it's the LP E6N8, big name, which is the same as a lot of the models that we're going to talk about in just a second. It does not allow for a battery grip, sadly. I think if Canon allowed for a battery grip, this camera would sell a lot more, but I think it would also steal some of the sales from the upper models. So I think it was intentional that they did not allow for a battery grip here. It does take dual SD cards, so that's a big advantage. UHS Mark II as well, so the most recent one, and the price comes in at 1,500 euro. In my opinion, like I said, the R7 is the best value for money that you can get out of the whole lineup. It's a fantastic camera that you can get for this money. After the R7 comes the R8 in terms of price, at least. However, this is not a camera that I would recommend for sports photography at all. I have made a video specifically about this and I explain my reasoning. You might disagree with me and that's fine, but I would not recommend. For what you pay here, the specs that you get for almost 2,000 euros, so it costs 1,960, I think it's a waste of money. I think you should either get the R7 and save some money, or go for save a little bit more and get the R6 or the R6 Mark II, or go for the 1DX Mark II, for example, and get a DSLR. For this price, for sports photography, obviously, I would not recommend the R8. That being said, let's go into the specs. So it's the first full frame of this lineup. Like I said, it does have weather sealing. It does not have a mechanical shutter, and that's one of the big disadvantages. The electronic shutter, 40 frames per second. Full frame, like I said, 24.2 megapixel. The battery is the LP E17, so the tiny ones, just like the R50 and the R10. It does not allow for a grip, although there is a tiny grip that you can get for this camera, but just for the pinky finger. So it's ridiculous, really. I don't know why someone would buy money for that. Anyway, it does not do any of the things that you would want from a battery grip, which is an additional battery, having the buttons to take pictures in portrait mode while rotating the camera, etc. So look into the video if you want to understand why I don't recommend this camera for sports photography, but I think you're getting the idea. And then for dual card slots, it does not have that. It only has one as well. And then the price, as I said, 1,960. So to sum it up, at almost 2,000 euro, I would not recommend this camera for sports photography at all. After the R8 comes the R6 and the R6 Mark II. Now there's obviously a lot of differences between the two. Whether or not those justify the price difference, that's for you to decide. I'm just going to highlight a few, but keep in mind that there's a lot more differences between the two. And again, some people say it's not worth the money. The difference between one and the other, it's not worth the money. Other people will argue, yes, it is worth the difference. Now, if you have the R6 already, I don't think it's worth the money going for the upgrade. But if you're thinking about one or the other, in my opinion, it is worth the money, but that's for you to decide. Now, both of them take 12 frames per second with the mechanical shutter. With the electronic shutter, the R6 takes 20 frames per second, the R6 Mark II takes 40, so double. Both full frame. The R6 has a 20 megapixel sensor, the R6 Mark II has a 24.2 megapixel sensor. both use the same battery, so the LP E6 and H both allow for a battery grip, both allow for dual SD cards. One comes in at 2,450 euro, the other one comes in at 3,150 euro. Now again, if you're thinking about these two cameras, I highly recommend that you look into reviews online that go into a lot of detail between the two, not just for the sports photography aspect of the camera, but also for video, because there's differences there as well. I think both cameras are really good for sports photography. You can't go wrong. If you're thinking about a full frame camera, a mirrorless full frame camera, this would be one of these two would be the ones that I would recommend. After the R6 and the R6 Mark II comes the Canon R5. So also full frame, also with weather sealing, just like the other two. 12 frames per second with a mechanical shutter as well. With the electronic shutter, it takes 20 frames per second, so much like the Canon R6. Full frame, 45 megapixel sensor. Okay, so I don't think this camera was designed with sports photography in mind. I think it's more for studio work, because you have top of the line sensor where you can have a lot of detail in your images. If you're thinking about printing huge billboards and just printing big, really, this would be the camera that you would go for studio work. Now, can you use it for sports photography? Of course you can. It allows you to crop in quite a bit without losing detail, right? And it's an amazing camera. It is quite expensive though. So this camera comes in right now at 4,850 euro. Okay, it uses dual SD cards. It does allow for a battery grip, and uses the same batteries as the R6 and the R6 Mark II, which is the LP E6 and H battery. Amazing camera. Not necessarily one that I would recommend for sports photography because of the price, but if you're given one, you'll be with an amazing camera. But if you're thinking about buying one, I'd go for the R6 Mark II. Saves you a lot of money, and it'll be just as good for sports photography. And the last model is the Canon R3. So creme de la creme, the top of the line camera from Canon as of right now. We'll get to that in just a second. So full frame camera takes 12 frames per second with the mechanical shutter, 30 frames per second with the electronic shutter. Full frame, obviously, 24 megapixel sensor, but it's a back illuminated stack sensor. And let me just read the description to explain what that means. So the new sensor features circuitry on its rear instead of its front, so it can gather more light, which reduces noise. 2 layers of circuitry are stacked together, transforming the speed that the sensor can send image data to its processor. So in short terms, it just means better performance in low light and much faster readout speeds. So the rolling shutter problem is eliminated with the R3, or at least highly reduced when compared to the previous models. So it's okay to use the electronic shutter with the R3 basically, and in low light it performs a lot better. As for battery, it uses the LP E19, and the grip, obviously it's already incorporated with a camera. You don't need to buy one. It's top of the line, so it is expected to come with the grip already, so you can flip it to portrait mode and you'll have access to the same buttons without having to do some weird positions. It uses a CF Express card and an SD card, and comes in at 6,980 euros, so almost 7K. But again, it's the best that you can get from Canon right now, and it's an insane camera. For sports photography, it is the best that money can buy right now from Canon. Now, are we expecting a newer model coming up in 2024? Absolutely. Let's just go back in time a little bit to understand how Canon announces their top-of-the-line models. So in March of 2012, we had the Canon 1DX being announced. And what happened in the summer of 2012? The London Olympics. April 2016, the 1DX Mark II was announced. And what happened in the summer of 2016? The Rio Olympics in Brazil. January 2020, the 1DX Mark III was announced. Tokyo 2020, the Olympics in Tokyo were going to happen in the summer. Obviously, because of COVID, they were postponed to 2021. But you get the idea. Canon has been announcing the top-of-the-line models just before the Olympics, so a few months before the Olympics. So we're going to have the Paris Olympics in 2024. So you can bet that the R1 is going to be announced in the first quarter of 2024 or so. That's what the rumors say, and given the history, it's highly likely that will happen. As for specs, all of these are rumors at the moment, so we don't know what the actual specs will be, but they're talking about 30 frames per second with the mechanical shutter. No information on the electronic shutter. Full frame, obviously 45 megapixel sensor, much like the R3, so back illuminated stacked sensor. DLP E19 battery or something of the sort. Obviously the grip already incorporated with dual CF express card, and the price we don't know at the moment. Obviously, like I said, all of these specs are rumors at the moment, but I'd be very, very surprised if Canon does not announce the R1 in 2024 in the first few months, because the Olympics are on the way. We're also going to have the Euro in Germany, so that camera is going to be absolutely everywhere when it comes to professional sports photography. And that's it for today. I hope this video helped understand where all of these models fall, especially if you're new to sports photography or to photography in general. I can understand that it can be a bit overwhelming having so many models and knowing where they stand, and not just in terms of price but in terms of spec. So if you enjoy this video, don't forget, hit that thumbs up because it helps this channel grow. Subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and until next time, take it easy guys. Stay safe.